Welcome back to Kids Life. Now, we've had many parents writing into us asking how to stop their kids from breaking their own possessions. Michael Grose, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Is there a simple way to get kids to stop, breaking their own possessions?
Look, it's an interesting one because we're quite an affluent society in many ways, far more affluent than we were, say, 30, 40 years ago. And so we have the propensity to give kids lots of possessions, whether they be toys or whatever it is. So I think that's part of the key of it, is actually to not always give kids too much so that they actually start to value what they've got. When you have too many things, you don't value it. There's also that angle of teaching kids to respect their property and their possessions as well. So if kids were to actually break something, I guess the issue is either you don't replace it, or you as a child will give me some pocket money if you want it to be replaced. So they've got some sort of ownership in the whole deal. I think there's an issue there of ownership, and there's also an issue there of respect.
And that's how parents need to deal with it, like what you were saying, not replacing things, and is that the best thing they can do?
I think so. I think it's actually teaching kids to value what they've got. It's also valuing their own things. So we often now live in a sort of replacement, throwaway type society, and we often don't repair things. And I know myself, we go through a microwave every couple of years or whatever it might be, and so we do churn through things fairly quickly. So it's got to be realised that kids sort of pick up on that, and they watch us as well. But the whole notion of respect for property and respect for their own possessions is important. And one of the things we do know is that when kids actually own it or have some sort of ownership or say in it, they're more likely to take care of it. You buy a child a mobile phone, he might not care about it. If he actually starts to pay for it himself, or purchase it himself, or have some stake in that, they're more likely to take care of that.
Definitely.
So it's somewhere along the lines of actually giving kids some ownership. It's also about actually teaching them and showing them how to care for things.
Yeah.
A lot of this I've found is about habit, and sometimes kids get into just poor habits of looking after their things. They may have finished doing whatever they're doing, they just leave their toys out rather than putting them away or putting the bike in the shed or whatever it might be. So there's also part of that aspect is actually teaching kids and getting kids into the habit of looking after their toys, looking after their possessions, looking after their property. And I guess there's another issue there. It's not only their own possessions or their own property, it's the sort of public property. It's the property at home. It's the shared space in which kids might be in, or it's the shared possessions such as the TV or DVD or the computers which kids will use. And there's a sort of a knack or a responsibility there of looking after that and tending for that as well. So that's an area where parents can really directly teach kids how they can deal and handle property well. And I'm a little bit one of these notions. If the kids are actually going to mess around with the computer and they don't treat it in a reasonable way, then maybe they lose the use of it for a day or two. So it's that notion of imposing some sort of consequence or withdrawing the use of it for a while. Again, teaching kids that you've got a right, and you've got a right to use stuff, but you've also got a responsibility to treat it in a certain way. That might sound a little bit old-fashioned in some ways. However, it's not giving kids a sense of entitlement. It's teaching them that everything has a cost to a degree. Kids won't sort of suddenly discover that. They've actually got to be reminded of it and taught that, just like we were when we were growing up.
Yep. And what about damaging public property or somebody else's property?
Yeah, no, look, fair call. And sometimes that grows out of damaging property at home, not looking after your own property. Again, it's very much that respect angle of respecting their environment. You need to respect their environment at home. If you can't respect that environment at home, then it's really hard to actually respect that environment in another place or in a broader sense. I think kids need to make some sort of restitution in that case. If they have actually done some sort of damage, they need to in many ways actually fix that damage up, whether it's through payment, whether it's through repair or whatever it is. Again, it's actually if you muck up, you make up. Now I know sometimes kids will cause some damage in a sort of society or communal sense because they're fairly angry or whatever it is, but in some ways I'm not talking about that sort of damage. I'm more talking about just not caring for public property.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, a perfect example of this would be a kid who's involved in a sporting club or something like that, yeah?
Sure. whatever leisure activities the kids are involved in, particularly in clubs, there's always property, there's balls, there's the whole range of things, and kids need to look after that and care for that. And I know one of the things that teachers do at school are very aware of the fact that kids need to be trained in the notion of looking after their equipment, whether it's what's on the desk through to the sporting equipment. And there are sort of little rules to make sure that that's looked after. Yeah. And I know often in schools what they'll do if the kids have used up all the pens, so to speak, well, you have to get one yourself. So similar sort of notion happens. But yeah, I think we need to be really careful that we actually do insist that kids actually treat property of all types with respect, particularly when they're in a sporting club or some sort of leisure activity.
Definitely. All right, well, thank you for your advice, Michael.
That's a pleasure.